it could be on there or not. It's up to
Okay.
you. And then
Let's pray. Our Father, our King, our Elohim, we pause, Father, at nearing the conclusion of this energy conference, timed with one of your Moedim, Shavuot. Father, we have learned so much in reading and relating and studying your word. And Father, as we start this last video, I ask that your Ruach will be with us, that messages will be clear to those who are concerned and interested, and that it will enhance their understanding and their being obedient to you, that they might have your Ruach to be with them as they witness to the world. Father, we praise you this day. We worship you and ask your blessing and your covering, especially for those who are traveling this day. Through Yeshua. Amen.
Hallelujah.
Eric, last video of this meeting anyway. It's yours.
just to bring everything to a conclusion, we thought we'd let everybody else give a little bit of their perspective, their personal experience of how to take information that we've tried to bring to people's attention and apply it as effective. In other words, here's a light bulb, but you plug it in, now you have light. Here's a hammer, but now you swing it and you can drive nails or make noise or something. How do you use this information? So, taking it out of the textbook and making it a useful, you might say, life-changing or life-affecting reality is what the purpose of this was all about. So I had expressed things during the week, different talks about the fact that the Moedim, to walk them out, would, just by doing so, change things. Because they are frequency, they are information, they are some form of actual expression or manifestation of Elohim, of Yahweh, of Yeshua. So Hugo's going to explain a little bit about what he did, and then we'll just hear from a few other people here.
I have made blocks with the letters of the alphabet, and as a student, the point is not only to gather information, but it's to process information, ponder, think, have the information like build up in your mind. So I do quite a bit of staring at the alphabet when I study, because it's vibrant. It's like living colors, and it's not just the colors, but the letters, the meaning of the letters, and I have added like the Mishkan within these letters. The fence, the barbecue grill or the altar, the laver, the menorah, the table of showbread, the altar of incense, and the Ark of the Covenant, which is also the Moedim, Pesach, Chag HaMatzah, Shavuot, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Chag Sukkot, and Shemini Atzeret. And also the 7 days of creation, the first day, second, and then. So, like I said, the point of studying is not only to gather information, but it's to ponder and then to stare at the Aleph Bet, because the Aleph Bet is is the word, and it is also, every letter is a picture of the Mashiach. So to stare at the alphabet is to look at the Mashiach's face and try to get impregnated by his face, by his countenance, by his portrait, and then what he's all about in his work. So I think to be Hebrew is to think, not just gather information. Is to ponder, reflect. This is part of the whole study.
Perhaps applying all of these principles to our lives at one time, continually. That's Hebrew.
Yes, yes. Thank you for adding that. That's it.
When I had first started processing through the alphabet, I made this little chart here, thinking it was self-explanatory, so there's no words on it. Thought people would look at it and know exactly what it meant. That it was sort of the Rosetta Stone of the language. So here's the modern Hebrew, the Sophite letters, the Paleo Hebrew, the Erectology font, and the pieces of the Mishkan down here, and added the way to vocalize them with English letter sounds down here. But I made this about 10 inches by 3 feet or so, 10 by 30 or something, and it just fits right above a casing of a door, between the door and the ceiling. Nobody usually puts pictures up there. You might have a valance on a window perhaps or something, but it's just a space above the door, and I noticed it sitting in the house, or you just kind of look around and it's always there, just kind of working. And I found myself either looking at it or noticing it out of the corner of my eye, or staring at it, as Hugo's saying, just staring at it and just going around and around and looking at it for many, countless hours over the course of now 15 years or so. And it does something to you. As you look at these alphabet letters, they just work on your mind. And this particular orthography, as I've mentioned before, I made a collection of genuine letter shapes, but there was no actual piece of archaeological stuff that matches this collection of letters. But then who was it? Was it Brady that said somebody found something that was exactly this collection of letters? Where was that? I think he just mentioned it yesterday. I can't recall. Forget what the artifact was. Somebody had found something that used the exact same group of letters from ancient times. And here I thought I had mixed and matched and picked these and put them together as being, the shapes of the letters speak of themselves. They don't need interpretation. Paleo letters, you can just stare at each paleo letter and hear what it says. You can virtually feel it, taste it, get it, grok it. People know that word. Just by staring at each letter and then looking at the letters in sequence, and then the colors are yet another level of meaning. But the point is, just by having this there and looking at it, one of the reasons why people put paintings in their house, a nice scene of a cottage with a garden, or maybe a wilderness scene, or an animal, or a sunset, or the beach, or something, is because the way it makes you feel, or the place that it just pulls your mind. And what I found is that by having these alphabet letters in visual proximity, not even necessarily studying, but just moment by moment, your mind referencing the letters, you begin to have your mind conformed. You become transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's a New Testament verse. These letters have that effect. They are active, energized they do something, they make something happen. And to just stare at them and allow them to affect your thoughts, whether subconscious or conscious, it has an effect. And you were saying you noticed the same thing, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You wanna describe your?
Well, the idea was maybe like Hugo also was saying, it's like just to look and gaze upon the letters would be like rewiring our brain, and every letter has so much depth, and just looking at the the order, how they are, there's a message in there, and I think as we meditate upon it, it has to become for all of us a personal thing that we see, and not somebody told me, but that as I watch, as I meditate, I can see, it become a testimony. So,
As I was growing up in a Christian environment of church and school and home, meditation, that word was not in our basket. The word meditation was in some mystical oriental basket. But I found that the word meditate is actually used in Scripture. David said that on the word of the Torah he meditated day and night. So if you were to be trying to compare all the various languages of the world, all the various religions of the world, the political systems, the moral systems, didn't you pursue that line of thought of trying to determine what is believable, what is truthful and honest? And can you express that a little bit?
yeah, I don't speak very much English, nor do I know a lot, but I would say I'm obsessed with finding the truth at whatever the price. And being a Christian, I was a Catholic, then I became a born-again Christian for many years. And then when I started reading Hebrew, and ancient Hebrew, the Bible in ancient Hebrew, I started to see so much more and realize so many lies that I once believed. And then I went into a kind of a major crisis. And one of my daughters are brilliant. They're used to be critical, to think. And she said, Mom, how'd you know now this is not a new sect you're going into? I said, yeah, you're right. And I don't feel like trying another sect or religion, call it whatever you want. But lies. So since I came across the alphabet and the meaning of each letter, I decided that I'm going to test to prove this to be wrong. And I've tried now for 3 years almost. And the more I try to, because I really want the truth, no matter what it is. I don't have a specific agenda. I want this to be the truth. I want to know the truth. And anyway, so think about, somebody killed, or I think maybe the policeman catch somebody, and they think that maybe that person killed someone, and so they're gonna interrogate them, ask questions. How do they know? And let's say it's not physical. I don't see the policeman, don't see the guy, okay? Because we don't want to go into the non-verbal language. But as you talk to me, maybe I think you're a murderer, I'm the policeman, or the other way around. And when I talk, you ask me questions to know if I did kill that person, I was there. What are you looking when I answer to you the questions to know if I'm lying or not?
Well, we were discussing this, and typically liars have a hard time remembering which lie they were telling, and so they'll trip up over their story, whereas the truth is fixed in your mind and you just tell the truth, and it's always the same truth.
Would you say it would be incoherent or inconsistent?
Yes, perhaps a little bit of both.
A little bit of both. So that's how they find out, asking you question from this side to know, okay, I tricked him or her, and then now I know she was lying.
That's how they compare words from different people collected at the same time, and do the stories corroborate? Is there any variance in the story?
Yeah. So I believe that to find the truth, we need to see that it's coherent and consistent. Now, let me be tough here a little bit. When you're a Christian and you believe in Christianity and Jesus came to the cross to nail the law, the Torah, it's really not the same God of the one of the Old Testament. It's like this evolution of a God. You know, once upon a time there was this huge, big, mean God killing everyone, boom, 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 and one day he became this cute little Jesus, peace and love, and it's not the same God, it's not the same story, it's incoherent, it's inconsistent, and it says, there's something wrong. Gotta go back to what the first book, the base, and say, okay, I want to find the consistency, the coherence, the same Yahweh, Heye, Asher, Eye, the same one that doesn't change.
Yes.
Yud, Hey, Vav,
Yeah.
Hey, the one that confirms, you know, exactly. Oh, that's fun. Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey. See? Yud is going on. Okay, I won't go there anyway. The next time. Okay, so the thing is, okay, there was an inconsistent there, obviously, incoherence. And so you think, okay, no, that has to be wrong. And then reading now much more the Old Testament than I used to, and meditating on the Aleph bed. And I try to test, maybe Aleph does not really mean what now we have been pondering about. It means, you know, the idea behind, the concept behind, the unseen realm, Bet, the incarnation and all that. All those meanings, are they real or not? So if they're real, they need to be confirmed. It needs to be confirmed somehow, right? It needs to be consistent. So when we see the Mishkan pattern, like Eric was showing, that the story of the Messiah is all through the letters. The letters, the Aleph Bet, are like the concept, the abstract reality, like, how do you say Plato in English?
Plato.
Plato was saying. And the walk of the Aleph Bet is the written Bible, the written book, the stories that we read. And that would be Socrates more, Socrate, the application, the concrete way. So that the thing you did this morning about Exodus 3, and we will go with it because it's so interesting. When we take the Aleph Bet as a second witness of or the first witness of a story, and they match, I think in some sort this is the plumb line. This is the plumb line that if it fits with the Aleph Bet, the stories, then we know we have the right stories. They confirm each other. So this is the two witnesses, heaven and earth. The concept, heaven, spiritual, which is the Aleph Bet. It's not something tangible. How do we see it? It's in the stories, in the action, in what happened to Israel, and all. So the more I read, the more I test and try this, it's one. We see this everywhere. So this is very exciting, and that's why I want you to share Exodus 3, because I think it's powerful there.
So yesterday we talked a little bit about Exodus 3, about the burning bush, and I drew on the board where the fire, Aleph Shin, ash is the word in Hebrew, and the bush, Samik Nun Hey, the bush is like the material, the ash, well that's the plasma, the immaterial. It seems to fit exactly what you're saying about Plato and Socrates, about heaven and earth, these two different perspectives, two different witnesses concerning the way to perceive truth, reality, or to determine what's trustable or believable. So I was going to get into this thing in Exodus 3 a little bit, but Linda, did you have something that you wanted to contribute into the...
Well, the nugget that I came away with,
Yeah.
the thing that hit me the most profoundly was your little stick drawing of the road, and the road, the Yashar Derek, is the Torah, and we walk it, and as long as we stay on that walk, we have his blessings, we make our Abba happy. He's proud to have us be his children, but as long as we get back on one of those side paths, there's the beast lurking on those side paths that we wander off onto. And if we get down there, free game. We're free game. We've got free will to go down those side paths, and there's that evil one waiting to consume whom he may devour. So that tells us that as long as we're on the Torah path, he's not allowed to mess with Yah's children unless he gives him specific permission, like Job. So most of the time that we're on those paths, that's our own fault. We're in deep stuff.
But we don't know what Job did to allow that to happen. There's a story, just for what it's worth, in the book of Yashar, or Jasher, as it's known. It says that Job was one of the advisors of Pharaoh, and his counsel to Pharaoh was in the question of what do we do? These Hebrews are growing and proliferating in such numbers that if we're attacked by an enemy and they turn against us, we've been had, you know. So what do we do? And Job said, well, throw the male children into the river to be eaten by the crocodiles. That's what the book of Jasher says. Now, whether it's talking about that same Job, that's what it seems to say, and Job is the oldest book in the Bible, so it was from way back then, before Moses, because Moses was he wrote the books of the Torah, but he was one of the children born after the throwing in of the babies started. That might have been what took that hedge of protection away from Job, but we don't see that written in the story of the book of Job in the Bible that we have. So we don't know the information that we haven't been handed, but it's an interesting consideration.
And the other thing you said was that where we can lose sleep about all the awful things that are going on in the world, you know, there's the Illuminati and there's the people playing chess with our lives, and all these things can really be upsetting. But when you said if we walk the Yashar Derek, if we walk the walk of Torah, that brings down the beast. That brings down the whole statue is our obedience, because the vibration of each of us walking our walk, we bless everything around us. That person, they learn it, they bless everything around them. It just emanates like a stone in water, and our walking out that path brings the beast down. Well, we can do that.
That reminds me of the story of Jericho. They walked around, the whole army walked around silent, not saying a word. They walked around the city of Jericho 7 times, 1 time a day for 7 days. And the 7th day, they walked around 7 times. And then suddenly they blew 7 shofar trumpets, and they shouted, and the walls came down. And people say, well, that was a miracle. Well, it might have just been physics. Yeah, it was miraculous, but it might have just been the application of physics, vibration, frequency, resonance, energy. And some people say, you know, the walking, in fact, you can find this information on the internet. There was an occasion when soldiers walking in lockstep were marching across a bridge, and didn't the bridge fall apart? And they found that when people walking in rhythm, it actually sends these shock waves through, which destroyed the structure of the bridge. So then they had to make up a rule that when the army walked across bridges, everybody would walk randomly, so it wouldn't do that. That's a real
it's a physics.
civil engineering matter.
We did those
So
researches.
when they were walking around Jericho, we don't know how they did it, but something was happening to dislodge the structure of the earth under those walls. Some people believe the walls fell down. Some people believe the walls sunk down into the earth, dropped straight down. Either way, where the promise of Yahuwah was to Rahab, the word could be innkeeper, could be harlot, depends how you translate it, but she, because her heart was in affinity with Israel, and she said, please, I want to be on your side with your Elohim, she was saved. Her and her family, whoever was in that room with her, was saved. That part of the wall didn't fall. So the point is, the physical world is built in such a way that Elohim has, you might say, the deck of cards stacked, so that at any time, the next card played is the exact pertinent card for the situation, and he's telling us how to play into it. I mentioned a moment ago earlier, that there was an account in Chronicles where a 1,000,000-man army was mustered as an adversary to Judah, to specifically Jerusalem, I think. This is a real historical event. They were a 1,000,000-man army. That takes a lot of years to prepare the food, the animals, train the soldiers, build the weaponry, get the plan, get the whole thing going. There's a lot of infrastructure there. Gather that whole thing up. They come right up to the proximity of the city, and the princes, the governors of Jerusalem, appeal to Yahweh and say, you know, we deserve this. But you, Yahweh, are our Elohim. You're our only hope. You are our only chance of salvation. Would you please forgive us, have mercy on us, and help us here? You don't need to, because we deserve, but we appeal to your loving kindness and your promise that we really are your people, and that your heart will turn to our favor if we turn to you, which we're hereby doing. Will you please help? And that night, I read a book concerning this where mice got into the fabrics and the ropes and the leather straps and all that was holding everything together, and that entire army woke up in the morning, you might say, with all their stuff laying on the ground. They couldn't do anything with it, and they took off running, and then Yahweh said, go chase them. And so the people of Israel jumped up and chased them out, and there was all the provisions. It could have gone differently. But the staging was all that work effort to produce that 1,000,000-man army and equip it. That was a different labor force. If it was a 1,000,000-man army, there might have been 10 million people working to produce, to equip that, and bring it to the gates of the city, drop it and run. Thank you. Talk about doorstep delivery. Yahweh accommodated that. But he had designed it as being the death of his own people if they hadn't turned. So at any moment, we don't know. We hear rumblings on this side of the world and on that side of the world, and we think, oh no, this is coming and that's coming. We keep listening to the news, who are making up lies and telling us this and that, and half the news stories may not even be real. But the point is, anything that happens will be in our favor for our good regard if we turn to Yahuwah. And how do you turn to Yahuwah? As I was saying the other day, in my thinking, he gave us the Shabbat, the Moedim, his name, and the ways of righteousness as the path of the Yashar Derek, the straight walk. That is how we turn to him, by doing, applying what he said. So anyway, John, did you have a...
John?
I guess not. Just a heads up, did you have anything you wanted to contribute, or should I go on with this thing in Exodus 4 that you wanted me to mention?
From the conference?
Not at the moment.
Okay, let me talk about this thing in Exodus 4 that you had requested,
Okay.
or Exodus 3, verse
Yeah,
4.
3.
So here's the point. Let me just start off in Exodus 3. Moshe was shepherding the sheep of Jethro's father-in-law, the priest of Midian. He guided the sheep far into the wilderness, and he arrived at the mountain of God toward Horeb. An angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a blaze of fire from amid the bush. He saw, and behold, the bush was burning in the fire, but the bush was not consumed. Moses thought, I will turn aside now and look at this great sight. Why will the bush not be burned? Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, and God called out to him from amid the bush and said, Moses, Moses, and he replied, Here am I. He said, Do not come closer to here. Remove your shoes from your feet, for the place upon which you stand is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, for he's afraid to gaze toward God. That's the English translation of the Stones Tanakh, Hebrew on one side, English on the other. Now, I read it word for word, verbatim of what they're saying here. I distrust the English translation, just so you know. I trust the Hebrew side, but if you don't read Hebrew, that does you no good. But I'll tell you a little bit about what I see here. So basically, I just take the Hebrew letters written in the modern font, write them in the Paleo, and then I put that aside so I'm not being influenced by that translation or some other translation. And then I'm just trying to look at the words. I can use the dictionary. I can use what I know each letter means, pictographically, independently each letter. But then, as Hugo has this chronological order, ayin means what it means, not just because it's an eyeball, but because it's between Samik and Pei. What do I mean by that? Samik looks like a picture of a tree or a bush, like a vine and branches. Ayin looks like a fruit or an eyeball or an egg. It's like the fruit that's born on the bush of the Samik. Pei is a mouth. A mouth eats the fruit. So the correlation between Samik Ayin and Pei is you do something, it bears fruit, and then the community has to eat that fruit, or you eat that fruit. In other words, it's this closed cycle system. That's just looking at those three letters. Mem and Nun, Mem is water, like a bowl of water, and Nun, they say, is a fish, or it's something that lives in the water that jumps out of the water. So because Mem and Nun are related like water and fish, the fish that isn't water, the fish lives in the environment. So now I know, oh, Mem is an environment. And Nun is a living thing which is in an environment but can jump into a different environment. So when we looked at the word for face, Pei Nun Yod, I can replace the proximity of the Pei being the environment like the Mem and say, well, your mouth, Pei is a mouth, so mouth is an environment. And if Nun jumps out of your mouth like Nun jumps out of water like a fish, what jumps out of your mouth? Well, your tongue or words. So I can read the word Pei Nun Yod as words, even though it's translated face or proximity or countenance or presence. So what I'm saying is that there's numerous ways to translate a word, but they're all within a certain zone of context. And one is by looking at the dictionary, the other one is looking by the picture level, and the other one is reading it in the context. And then just the other day we had the 50th day, which is Shavuot. Well, Mem Nun happens to line up with Shavuot. 2 letters, 1 festival. As it coincidentally is, there's 1 day, which is the waving of the cut sheaf. You count 7 sevens, then the 50th day is the waving of the 2 loaves. It's 1 festival for 50 days. That's my understanding of the way it works. Most people, most books that you'll read, call it 2 festivals. The reason these are both red, these are both purple, these are all 3 blue, is because this is 1 festival, these 2 are 1 festival, these 2 are 1 festival, these are each 1 festival. It's a key, it's a pattern. There's something encoded in there. And so there's these different ways to read how to spell a word, or how to read the spelling of a word, based on various ways to use this key as various mechanisms. That's a whole other story that we're not going to get into. But I'll just read. We were going to do this the other day. I think the first day of the gathering, I was going to have Brady read Exodus 3. We never did. So here we'll conclude with the beginning, like a full circle.
There you go.
That's true.
James Joyce and what was that book, Finnegan's Wake? He started, the first sentence of the book was half a sentence, the last half ending in a period. You don't, what's going on? Why would you start a book with the last half of a sentence? But he ended the book with the first half of the sentence that was the first half of that sentence that was the beginning. So you don't know the story until you get to the end, how it fills the whole thing. That's what we're doing here. This is a little bit of a Finnegan's Wake thing. So this is my translation, the Erictology, perspective translation of these same verses. Moshe was in distress, thinking, why? Crushed, worthy of complaint, ejected. Yet the occasion perhaps a great advantage of excellent profitability. There's this word Jethro, which is the name of his father-in-law, which is actually the word for hypotenuse. It also means he will search. So this is just a little taste of what I do in, look at this. What is a hypotenuse? If you have 2 different lines, x-axis, y-axis, and you connect some dot on this axis with some dot on this axis, opposite the right angle, you form a triangle, and this leg is the hypotenuse. Now, if that hypotenuse isn't there, and all you have is this thing and that thing, then I refer to that as there's a phantom hypotenuse. There's an implied hypotenuse. If you think I have this trajectory of my life, like Moshe for his first 40 years was raised in the Egyptian court, highly educated, a general of the Egyptian army, and on a certain track, and then all of a sudden, this thing happens where he kills a guy, runs for his life, and now he's on this different track, a different axis, shepherding his father-in-law's sheep in the Saudi Arabian peninsula, known as Midian, for another 40 years. And it seems like Moshe was sitting there wandering around with the sheep in this land of Midian. It's called wilderness. But the same word midbar, meaning wilderness, is also mem, meaning a noun or to put into a place. Dabar is the word for word or speech. A place of words, a place of speech, that's language. Was he pondering language? He knew Egyptian, and being an official in the diplomatic international relations with the Empire of Egypt, I would guess he probably was familiar with Canaanite, which is the Semitic language of a Hebrew base of some kind, maybe even cuneiform, which came from Sumer, which was even an older place. You got the Hittites, you got the Midianites, you've got these different people groups, but it's the Semitic language. Moses probably knew something about that. Even if it hadn't maybe been developed as we know it, I think Moses, according to this, was maybe pondering the language, because the word midbar, wilderness, is used here. So now my mind is on a certain track because I'm seeing the Hebrew word. If Moses looks at his life in Egypt as one thing and his life in the wilderness of Midian as the other thing, the phantom hypotenuse is, how do you connect this with that? What in the world is my life about? Am I off track? Am I on track? Is this divine providence? Is this predestination? And he's probably just going like, what? The word for sheep, Zadi Aleph Nun, means to go out. It could be the word for Moses was ejected. Moses was living in a banished state of exile. So does it mean sheep, or does it mean banished state of exile? We could go on with every word, which we're not going to do. Let me continue with this. He will explore the oneness, raking up coals of fire from our terror. The same word for one is to rake up coals, and the word for terror. What have those got to do with each other? We could elaborate, but in the interest of time, I'm saying the word for Yithro means he will explore. It means discoverer, and it means remainder, excessive, hypotenuse, advantage, profit gain, excellence, added, superfluous. And so all I'm trying to do is look at one word, take all the possible meanings, and spin them into the story, to elaborate the story. That's all I'm doing. I won't do this for every word. I have done it for every word, but just to get on, that's what we're talking about. And then, this is what it says. Yes, here it is. It's almost like what? He found the hypotenuse. He found the connection between this axis and that axis of the stories of his life for this 40 years and that 40 years.
Which is the letter thing, because this morning when you were sharing, you were giving
That's
me,
right.
Yeah.
The letter Hey is the word Va. The word Hine means behold. The word Hineni means here I am. It's kind of like, hey. People say it's like opening a window, or opening the window of enlightenment and understanding. Yes, here it is. Be the one who establishes a political jurisdiction navigating phonetics. Pioneer the future using words. The place where words actually import, bring in the manifestation, the vision, concept, which Elohim has let lie fallow, devastated and wasted. This is exactly explaining why we're doing this. I read this sentence out of this passage, and it validates as a witness the entire study that we call the Erectology, which is to take words and letters and translations which seem to mean nothing, and it puts them in an order where you can go, wow, Yahweh said something which means something which everyone has forgot, yet his message is true. And if you can arrange them like you put spaces, this is the Mishkan, this is the days of creation, these are the various colors, suddenly you can see a resonant, ringing cry of truth. Because the frequencies seem to correlate like cogs in gear wheels, meshing perfectly, resonating with the entire rest of the universe, and you can just feel it. That's my experience. And so when I read something like this, let me just set up a little bit of a problem. It's said, if you look on the internet studying Semitic language, Hebrew, the Phoenicians invented the Paleo-Hebrew in 1050 or thereabouts BC. Moshe supposedly wrote the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, in Hebrew, and Moshe lived about 1500 BC, which is 500 years earlier. So if the Phoenicians invented Hebrew, or the phonics of the Semitic alphabet, phonetic, which became Greek, which became Latin, which became English, French, Spanish, Russian, these other various things, how did Moses write in Hebrew 500 years before it was invented? Either you can say, well, Moses must not have written in Hebrew, or the history that the linguistic scientists have told us that the Phoenicians invented at around 1050 BC just isn't true, because there's a 500-year discrepancy. This, to me, looks like Moshe must have known something about the language the Canaanites were speaking and using, pictographically, hieroglyphically, which is pictograph, that the Egyptians are using, these little wedge-shaped cuneiform things that the Sumerians were using, and somehow Moshe put the thing together and formulated a political jurisdiction. The word political jurisdiction is translated Midian. Priest of Midian is the way the narrative reads, but the word priest is Kaf He Nun. Kaf He means yes, so, truly, thus. And He Nun means gladly, here it is. So Cohen, Kaf He Nun, is kind of a blending of the words, hey, yes, here it is, woohoo! That's what a priest is supposed to be doing, is showing the truth, the real truth, to the people who are interested, like your personal pursuit was. So I think that my interpretation of what's happening here kind of explains what was Moses up to. He took advantage of what he had learned in the Egyptian schools and through his international relations, and now he's out here with these sheep wandering the wilderness, the language, in distress on the one hand, but then searching on the other hand for purpose and meaning. He must have been contemplating the letters. Just like this, somehow he was looking at the pictures and suddenly something flashed. What flashed? A burning bush. And as we talked yesterday, ash, the fire, like that's where kind of where we get the word flash, or ashes of fire, that's all Hebrew. Somehow there's this esoteric reality from Elohim's perspective, like the Platonic view, and then the bush, the Samic Nun He, the Sana, the practical earth narrative, which is to be the Socrates, the Socratic view, and somehow the one wasn't consuming the other, but they were both cohabitating, and I think, based on reading this text, that somehow that spoke. It said that Elohim sent a messenger, a malach, an angel, to speak to him through the burning bush, in the midst, mem tav vav kaf. Well, tav vav kaf nun is the word for astronomer, and peacock tail, and it has to do with an array, like the constellations, the stars are placed just so, like a typewriter keyboard. And somehow, the arrangement of the letters in a particular order, the arrangement of the pictures in a chronological sequence, and if Moshe knew of the 7 days of creation, because he was the Elohim of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and they must have known, I would think, about the Shabbat, maybe the Moedim, but the point is, I think Moses started putting this all together. He didn't invent the Hebrew language, but he might have comprehended what Elohim built into the Hebrew language at this moment.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. Like Abraham was told to sephir the stars, the word sephir means count, but it also means connect the dots. make it into a story, which is the constellations. Happened about 2000 BC. Abraham lived about 2000 BC. Daniel was told to hide the word, seal the book. The paleo was turned into the modern. The paleo stopped being used around 500 BC. I think paleo was told, empowered, commissioned by the archangel Gabriel to do that while he was in Babylon, gave it to Ezra. Ezra came back to Jerusalem with the modern Hebrew. That just looks like detective work. Let me proceed. What this means is that if I'm translating this right, the words actually import the manifestation of what Elohim has let lay fallow. Elohim says, if you guys don't want the blessing, I'll put it off to a later generation. Israel's still his favorite people, so to think there's another group instead of Israel is wrong thinking. But he removed it from multiple generations until here we are after 2010. And I believe that it's in the language that the reality of the promised blessing is described. Therefore, to go back and look at Hebrew, to think Hebrew, to have the Hebrew mind, the Hebrew heart, is to have the heart of Elohim, the creator of the heavens and the earth, who said, the insignia that you have the right guy is that I'm the one who made this place, in 6 days rested the seventh. So the Sabbath is the sign of my identity. So therefore, if you sit down and rest on the seventh day, as I did, implementing that as a very specific marking, like a branding iron, like a tattoo, like a signet ring, the Shabbat, Yom HaShabbat, the seventh day, is the indication that I, Yod He Vav He, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, is your Elohim. And you, because you are now heeding my voice and living your life accordingly, are indeed my people. So my point is, I'm not trying to beat up the Christian church. I'm saying the Christian doctrines have been used to steer into a lie, millions of people over the past 2,000 years into a lie rather than the truth. And it's not the people's fault. They were believing their Kohanim, their priests, their preachers, their pastors, their missionaries, their evangelists, apostles and prophets. Why did none of these guys ever tell them to... They go to heaven, they come back, what if they say, oh gosh, I got a message, we better start keeping his day, we better start regarding his Moedim, we better start regarding his name. None of them say that, so the people that listen to those guys say, maybe, I guess God even doesn't care. Maybe so. But what I hear is that when you look at these Hebrew words, you realize, oh, he cares. He cares a lot. But he cares more that we have the free will of choice, and so he gives us a choice, return to my words or not. So why we're making these videos is so that anybody else who cares can hear the words of truth and choose to return to the words of the Torah that he said are forever, that he said once we turn to these words, it will recreate the culture of the people of Israel, and the import is what the Jews call HaMashiach, the Messianic era, the age of Yahweh's divine favor poured out lavishly upon his people Israel, the confederated 12 tribes, and the rest of the world will stand back aghast and in awe and in fear and in terror, similar to what happened in the book of Esther after the occasion of Purim. That's what we're looking forward to, and that's what these verses seem to say. Let me go on. Then it was made perceptible. Yahweh sent a message toward him, manifest as flames of fire in the midst, relayed by the bush he was observing. Behold, the bush burns in fire, but the bush is not devoured. So declares Moshe. Fascinating. Sounds like Spock. I will take what is only half done. I will harness the suitable appearances, the Socratic view, and change regard by running with this great spectacle, considering the Platonic, the ash fire point of view. And then there's this picture about flying. In other words, he's saying it'd be incredible to fly, but how do you do it scientifically? Is flying, well, that's a miracle. No, it's physics, it's science, it's mathematics, it's geometry. How do you communicate knowledge without destroying the bush? How do I observe letters fit to regard this great spectacle of a burning bush not yet destroyed. The bet form is really the aleph, immaterial essence of the aleph. It is and it is not. Bet, I'm talking about these things, but I'm also dropping this concept into John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word was with Elohim, but the Word is Elohim. Either it is or it is not. That's the mystery of aleph and the mystery of the essence of the meaning of bet. Anyway, going on to verse 5. Well, verse 4 says, that was verse 5. Let me say verse 4. Vayira Yahweh ki sar la raot, vayikra Elio Elhim matok hasana. Vayamer Moshe, vayamer hineni. Okay, here's what this is saying. And Yahweh saw that Moshe turned. But you could say this word means revolt or rebellion and to turn away. It's where we get the word sari. The word is pronounced sar, Samic Resh. But it also means there's alienation or a disconnection. La ra'ot is lamed resh aleph vav tav. Oh, that means to perceive. So Yahweh saw that he turned to perceive. That's the way the narrative reads. But you could say that Yahweh observed that this was a little beyond Moshe's ability to understand. There was a disconnect between what was happening and what Yahweh was trying to communicate, so he sent this melech, this angel, to speak through this. Well, the interesting thing about the spelling of the word la ra'ot, lamed resh aleph vav tav, is that resh aleph hey means to perceive, lamed means for the sake of or in consideration of, but this has a vav tav. That's a plural. Perceptions, understandings, seeings. Why is this there? The translators don't know, so they just say, he turned to perceive. That's not even necessarily the best Hebrew word. But aleph vav tav means a letter of the alphabet. So it might mean that he turned to perceive the letters of the alphabet, but was disconnected somehow. That's just right there in the words. But you don't read that in English, but if you ponder and just look and consider, what is resh aleph? What does aleph vav tav? What does lamed resh mean? What does samic resh really mean? And as you sit there and start looking at these letters, all this stuff, suddenly this stuff comes to view. And he called. So the Yahweh speaks to Moshe through the bush, and he called to him, Moshe, Moshe. And Moshe said, here I am. That's the narrative. What's the word Moshe mean? To be drawn out. What's the word he called? It's vayikra, like the first word of the book of Leviticus. The word kra means to learn how to read Scripture. To call a meeting, to get together, to have an assembly, to learn how to read Scripture, which is what we're doing, is the word vayikra. So out of the bush came this voice to Moshe to learn how to read Scripture according to the meaning of perceiving each letter, the aleph vav tav, and Moshe was drawn out. And he said, here I am. He located himself on the hypotenuse between these two lives of the prince of Egypt and the shepherd of Midian, and he made the connection to formulate the Israelite nation, the identity of the Am, Ayin Mem, of Yod He Vav He, their Elohim, through the language. That's what this is saying. But it wasn't his idea. It was Yahuwah's idea, projected to him through the malach, the messenger, seeing the fire and the bush, and that they're not being consumed. All this is going on in reading these words. Verse 5. And then, Vayomer al Kuf Resh Bet, Karav Halam Shal. What this is saying, and he says, upon drawing near, wait, take off your shoes from upon your feet, for the ground that you're standing is holy ground. And you go, oh, holy ground? Is there such a thing as holy ground? Sounds like witchcraft. Sounds like Hollywood television. Sounds like...
A portal.
Sounds like what?
A portal.
A portal? What's that? A
Like
porthole.
Portal.
A porthole of some sort of...
Witchcraft.
What is this holy ground business? Well, here's an interesting thing. The word for spelling shoe is Nun, Ayin Lamed Yod, and then the letter Kaf at the end means your. Take off the shoes from upon your feet. So, but the spelling of the word shoe, Nun, Ayin Lamed Yod is Ali, Aliyah, which is to be elevated, to be raised into a different position, more supreme, a promotion, a higher regard,
Come up.
to come up here, the upper room that the disciples were meeting on in Shavuot in the book of Acts. That was an aliyah, a promotion. And he says, draw near. So as Moses starts to draw near, he goes, wait, there's an offense. What, an offense? That's the word Shin Lamed. The word Hey Lamed Mem literally means stunned, to strike or beat, or suit or fitted. So Moshe is starting to walk, and all of a sudden, stunned. It's like that's the meaning of the word wait. Stop. It doesn't say stop, wait, but it says stunned and to strike or beat. So I'm reading into what's happening. How do I picture this scene? Like you're directing a movie. You know, what are the people doing? Moshe is called forward and then stunned and stop. What? The shoes on your feet. Wait a minute. The shoes on your feet, he says there's an error or an offense, so something is now can't happen. What? Nun, Ayin Lamed Yod Kaf. You being elevated is being thwarted. You can't be risen up to this higher level because of what? The shoes on your feet? Ma'al, Mem Ayin Lamed, Regaleka. Resh, Gimel, Lamed, Yod, Kaf. Regaleka, your feet. Remember that word we talked about the other day? Regal, where we get regalia, regal, relegated, religious. It's also customs, habits, and traditions. So I can read this as saying, take off the things on your feet, which are your customs, habits, and traditions, which are grounding you and impeding you from rising to the nobility that you're being called to. And how do you take those things off your feet? By walking the Moedim, by sitting down on Shabbat. Taking your shoes off on Shabbat, kicking them up and falling asleep will rise you up.
This is so clear.
Because the ground where you stand, but it doesn't exactly say that. It says the place, hamakom, that you amad. Well, that word means pillar, column, stand, platform, pagination, ayin, vav, mem, dalet. I was describing the other day at Shavuot that the Moedim were these pillars. So he's saying the placement of these pillars, then alio, upon it, higher, upper, supreme, adamat, land, earth, kadosh, hayo, ho, kadosh it is. There's something about the land or the territory, the terrestrial, the place to live, the frame of mind, your whole sense of reality is up there, established on these pillars of the Moedim. And if you's wearing them earth shoes, walking out the culture of your regal regulations, you'll never get there. You got to take those off.
Wow.
And then he goes on to say, now let me tell you who I am. Now that you've taken those things off, now Yahuwah speaking says, I will inform you of my name. I am the Elohim of your fathers. I'm the Eloi of Abraham, the Eloi of Yitzhak, the Eloi of Yaakov. The interesting thing about that is that Abraham, the word avar, means pinion wings, which the eagles use to pick up and fly and to catch the wind drifts, to soar to incredible heights. The word Yitzhak is hilarious laughter, sport, and entertainment, and it's almost like what you'd expect to see fireworks going off on some big championship show. Yaakov, the word kov is where we get the word cube, or the Kaaba stone. It's an Arabic word where that big black rock where they go around in Mecca. It's all the same word. It means to go into the third dimension. Like you're stuck on the x-axis and y-axis of terrestrial terra firma, and if you want to shoot up into the z-axis, where Abraham, Yitzhak, woohoo, and Yaakov superseding, flying over, catching the wind